Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids, and in today's video we are going to be ranking on a tier list every single fusion that we had in 2023. Which ones were the best? How does it look? Now we can look back in hindsight, retrospectively. That can also inform us moving forwards as well for the future in terms of how it looks. Judging fusions in the future. This video is inspired entirely by Saph from HH Gaming. He just put out this video a little bit earlier today. I froze it really at the most complimentary point in his video. But yeah, I wanted to dive in. I haven't seen his yet, so I'm not sure how he's going to rank them. I'm not sure how I'm going to rank them either, so this should be quite fun. This is the first time recording. I've got a new standing desk promo video on that coming soon. So the first video, we're standing. I'm not sitting. I'm bouncing. We could jump around. We could do everything. It's crazy in here. Oh my god, we're free. Let's go. So, starting off, interestingly enough, I'm actually going to change the tiers here, if that's okay with you guys. Just for how I personally like to do it, I'm just going to have S, A, B, C, and D. And the way I look at it is B is quite average. It's like, all right, very average. A is like, yeah, definitely do the fusion. You might not need them everywhere, but it's a good champion to have. S is like, definitely do the fusion. They are definitely going into your teams. C is, you could do the fusion, but you're probably never going to use them, or almost never. And then D is, it probably wasn't worth the hassle. Like in hindsight, they're probably never even going to be used. So that's sort of my ranking for this. The first one is Pythion. I think Pythion has to go into S tier, to be fair. I'm going to put Pythion in S. I think barely scrapes it in. Yeah, I think barely so, in the sense that he's an extremely good champion. That's why he's in S tier. He is so tanky. He brings a ton of healing, a ton of survivability, and an AoE resurrection for your team. It's just really solid. It's not super useful everywhere, right? You're often, you don't need that much survivability, but he is a staple in the arena. Very good for the Cursed City, a lot of Doom Tower bosses. I mean, he's an S tier fusion. This is a fusion that everyone should have done if they could have, and that was very much, I think, clear at the time. We can also talk about that. At the time, I think all of us really were saying Pythion is a must-do. He's an insanely good fusion. He does make it to S tier. Next up then is Oella. Oella, I'm going to put her in the A tier. Oella is really strong as a resistance champion and a really strong healer as well. She pumps out a ton of healing, extending your buffs, keeps up increased resistance the whole time. She's super solid. Again, the only reason she's in A tier for me is increased resistance hasn't really turned out to be essential everywhere. It is nice, and like you can build some really cool Hydra teams, and you can maybe build some cool Bommel teams. Maybe some cool Cursed City teams are going to come in, and she is phenomenal for it. I do think, obviously, you've got some champs that are somewhat better, like Pythion. Who's better than Pythion? I mean, it's a little nebulous, like Sephi or Duchess. They're similar though, like Pythion, he's just different, but he's on a similar level. With Oella, you do have similar champions as well. Like, what's her name? I can't remember. I can't think when I'm standing up, apparently. The Demon Spawn, I feel like she's, with Ear the Crown, I feel as a healer is quite similar to Oella. And then obviously you've got the Ogre, and you've got Grazur bringing in the increased resist, increased defense, and extending the buffs. He's sort of like a better increased resistance champion than her overall, but she's got such a solid package. For me, she is definitely A tier. I think she probably doesn't go into S because, again, you might not necessarily be using her, but she is a champion for me. Looking back on it, definitely wanted to get her, and I'm definitely glad I did. And she could come in and be clutch to multiple teams. It's certainly possible. Supreme Elhain is up next. Funny enough, we're going S, A, then B. I think Supreme Elhain is sort of the definition of a B tier champion. She's a great damage dealer. But, she's a fairly straightforward damage dealer in that sense. She's got a big AoE, hits hard. She's got a couple of big single target things, the extra turn. Thing I like about her, she can farm Nightmare Campaign really well. She can farm Minotaur really well. She can do that with your arena gear. So she's solid enough. Also, she is very good against Nekret the Great, which is very useful for live arena. And also probably for classic and tag as well, right? To counter Nekret. She can just one-shot the person protected by Nekret, and that's really useful. But she's kind of niche, right? You might have better nukers. You might not need her. She might be your best nuker. It's sort of mixed. It was a very difficult fusion. I think that's probably what would definitely put most people off doing it. Like if it was an easy fusion, you'd be like, yeah, grand, she's cool. But yeah, I feel like she's a B tier. B tier champion. Next up then we have, Razelvarg. Razelvarg is S tier. Do we put Razelvarg above Pythion? Is that too spicy? Let's maybe rearrange the tiers at the end. But for me, Razelvarg, he's S tier. This is such a strong champion for Hydra, especially. Really shines there. Also extremely solid for Fire Knight Hard with his speed, with his multi-hits. Really, really good. The increased speed for your team as well. Can help you even stay alive with the leech. He's just super useful. Razelvarg is brilliant. I will say as well, when they came out, and we're talking about when they came out, Pythion, I think everyone knew that he was extremely good. It's pretty straightforward, really. Oella, I think most other people were really down on Oella. They did not like her. Again, probably those people will probably rate her lower. But for me, I felt that she was kind of A tier when she came out, and I kind of stand by that. Supreme Elhain, again, I think people were fairly down on. She's B tier, so that's sort of fair. You'd have mixed opinions. Razelvarg, I think a lot of people were negative. People were very split on Razelvarg, which is funny looking back. It certainly wasn't clear that he was so good when the fusion came out. He was a weird champion, right? How is this damage scaling off of speed and attack and all of that? And how does it work out? It's turned out now, with more practice, that he's really come into his own. And he's really good for clan boss. He's really good almost everywhere. Razelvarg's insane. So yeah, for me, he's definitely S tier. Then we had Jetni the Giant. I'll put Jetni in the C tier. Jetni is, again, she's a nuker. She's got a couple of AoEs, but she doesn't have the crazy speed scaling like Razelvarg does, and the utility that Razelvarg has. Supreme Elhain, she's void, and she's got the whole counter Necret the Great thing. She's more useful, I think, as well. You've got sort of a bit of an anti-shield thing sort of going on with Jetni. To get her full potential, though, you need to run her with her partner, Alsgor. Now, yeah, Alsgor's really good, so that's something that you can do, but not essential. I wouldn't put her in D tier. I don't think that Jetni is totally useless. I think that it's probably okay to grab this champion, and certainly I think with the Cursed City now, and if there's ever any restrictions in live arena at some point or in arena tournaments, she could be really good. So she's sort of worth probably grabbing, maybe, but it's fairly low priority, and you might have her just sitting in your vault. To be honest, I've got her just sitting there waiting. I haven't built her up yet, but for me, she wasn't a definitely skip. She's just a very low priority champion. Next, we have Great Hoof Loriaka, who for me definitely is a D tier. I did skip this one, and I don't regret it. It's probably the only, the fusion I skipped that I do not regret. There's been one that I've skipped as well, which was the previous year, which, what's his name? I've forgotten. Yeah, standing up, I can't think of any champion names. Lonatharil, or Lonatharil, or Lonatharil. I don't know how to say his name, but I did skip his fusion intentionally, and I do regret that one, because then Fire Knight Hard came out, and it's he's actually really good for Fire Knight Hard. The shield, the AoE damage, great for the waves, and the shield for the boss, ally attack for the boss, great. Good for Cursed City as well. I regret skipping that one. Do not regret skipping Loriaka. I think this champion is just weak. She's just undertuned. She's got the decreased resistance thing, just not been very useful, unfortunately, in the game. They brought out a bunch of decreased resist champions. Supreme Kale came in with increased accuracy and decreased resistance, and there just hasn't been anywhere where that really matters yet. So yeah, Great Hoof Loriaka that was an easy skip, honestly. Just not that good. Yeah, not a great champion. I did do a video where I showed some uses for her, but she's honestly a safe skip. Next up then we've got Gnut, Gnut. Gnut is how you actually say it. I am actually going to rearrange this preemptively. Gnut goes to top of S tier. Gnut is the best fusion there's ever been in the game. We could even have that. I think the S plus tier idea that Saph had there, that you could totally reserve that just for Gnut alone. He is an absolute must-get champion, right? Probably the best champion in the game for Fire Knight Hard, with the triple hit freezes, A1, controls that turn meter better than anyone else can. On top of that, the best single target enemy max HP nuke as well on his A3. Gnut opens up so many different strategies. Honestly, getting 2 Gnuts would be ideal. That opens up even more. But yeah, this champion is absolutely crazy. He is probably the best champion in multiple of your dungeon teams and boss teams. He is that good. He is insane. Next up, Emic Trunkheart. This is a tricky one. I think Emic probably go in A, probably top of A. I think top of A. Arguably, you could put him in S tier. I think we could have some debate on this. For me, I did miss the Emic fusion, which is why I've not done any videos with him, right? I missed him by accident. Meant to do it, messed it up. I missed the one of the last events and was just like 25 fragments short on the 4th epic and sitting there going, what's happened? This sucks. Emic, I think he's an A tier champion. He opens up a lot of very specific team comps with unkillable. You can do some Hydra unkillable teams, and that's pretty cool with taunt as well, so that it delays the devour timer, the taunt buff, which is weird, but apparently intended. Weird, if you ask me, but okay. He opens up Iron Twins. He opens up a lot of dungeons. This guy opens up a lot of teams. So I definitely think for progression, he is actually kind of insane, like S tier for progression. I do think when you go later in the game, you know, there's a lot of ways to do it. Like for me, if I got Emic Trunk Heart, what would I do differently? Possibly nothing. Probably nothing. I might build up some teams for fun, but I don't know if he actually improves anything for me. So that's why he's sort of an A tier champion. It's like Oella. They could unlock a whole bunch of stuff. You could build some really specific teams. I think that he's generally more useful than Oella for sure. But yeah, I don't know. Like S tier, he's certainly not on the level of Gnut. Like if someone is going like, I got a Gnut, but I don't know if I'll really use him, you'd be like, what are you talking about? You are absolutely batshit crazy. Of course you're using your Gnut. Emic is not on that level, but very, very good champ. Next up then, we've got Isbeil. I know a lot of you guys like Isbeil. I've not been very impressed. I put Isbeil in B tier. Probably put him ahead of Supreme Elhain. You know, he's sort of a progression champ. He's got some ally protection and healing. He's very tanky. He's got the AoE decreased speed. He can provoke on his A1. It's a bit awkward. I think if you're playing manual on Hydra, he could be okay, right? As a decreased speed champ with a provoke. You know, you need to manually target the provoke, but you can totally do it. That's decent. And yeah, I think, you know, he's a solid supporter. I've not been particularly impressed by him. I think I'm much more negative about Isbeil than most people. But yeah, like I tried him in Hydra and I wasn't particularly impressed. I thought he's fine, but he's not blowing me away. But yeah, again, I seem to be different from most of you. Most of you really like Isbeil a lot. I've not been super sold on him yet. Maybe my opinion will change. Again, to talk about, I mean, Gnut was kind of, obviously, as soon as we realized his A3 was enemy max HP, when they first told us about Gnut, they didn't tell us it was enemy max HP. But Gnut was immediately recognized as being insane, and he is. Emic, I think, was received fairly. He was considered to actually be super OP, and then they nerfed his A1, generating a shield. They nerfed it into the ground, and then people were a bit unsure. So I think that kind of threw things off, that he was really OP when he was first revealed, and then they nerfed him. So there was a bit of unsureness about how good he was. And then Isbeil, I think Isbeil was fairly mixed. I think probably people consider him around B, maybe A. But yeah, there we are. Then we go, we're going to have a few very controversial ones here at the end. Next up is Bambus 4-leaf. I think Bambus probably goes in the B tier overall as well. Bambus, I think he's really underrated, honestly. Yeah, Bambus is really underrated. You can do a bunch of cool stuff with this champion. The problem is building increase accuracy teams, decrease accuracy, building around his passive. All of that stuff is really complicated. I think that puts a lot of people off, right? I think people like the Pythion. It's simple. What's he do? He's really tanky, and he revives people, and he's really tanky. There's not very much thought that needs to go into it. It's very straightforward. How do you build a Bambus team? How do you use Bambus? That's much more complicated, right? So I think that puts a lot of people off actually building teams at Bambus, but I think he's solid, right? I do think he's solid. I've seen some cool Hydra teams. There's a guy in my Discord, Hydra Guru, that likes to build a lot of Bambus teams. He's done some cool stuff. I think he's a cool champion. So yeah, I think Bambus is pretty cool. Again, I think he's sort of B tier. I don't see him necessarily making it into any teams, but he absolutely can and do some cool stuff for you. Kind of like all of these B tier champions, right? For some people, they're going to be insane. For others, you might not need them. Next was, after Bambus, Timit the Fool. Timit, I think Timit is probably a B tier champion as well. I think he's going to be a bit better when the polymorph nerf comes in, right? Stripping buffs, putting out the true fears. He is good with Cash of the Rye. Like I said, I think you combo the two of them together, and it's actually a pretty solid arena team. It's like I think I've been on record as saying like 8 out of 10. It's what I give the pair of them together, like a good solid arena team. Now the reality is that a lot of you watching and a lot of you doing these fusions are either super late game or you're big spenders. And for a lot of those people, like 8 out of 10 might as well be 0 out of 10, right? you know? Like if I'm gonna pay, if I'm the sort of person who comes in and spends like $1,000 a month on the game, like 8 out of 10 is useless to me. I only want the 10 out of 10s, you know? So Timit's not gonna see much love. I think Timit got way too much hate. I can tell you for me, because I have him, he was amazing for Cursed City. There were so many levels on hard, even in Centranos, where he was really, really, not Centranos, that's obviously the whole thing, in Soul Cross, where he was really clutch. Like, he basically hard carried any level of Cursed City that he was in. He's very good for that. And yeah, for further difficulties of Cursed City, this guy could be absolutely nuts. He's a decent arena champion as well. But yeah, he does sort of rely on Kaja to get this most value. He can get away with it in Cursed City. But yeah, elsewhere, you kind of need to be with Kaja. There's just not a ton of content for him to thrive in outside of Cursed City, to be honest. But I think he's a solid champ, right? I think he's B tier. I think rating him lower is a bit unfair, actually. Then we had Ugir the Worm Eater. I think Ugir is probably B tier as well. Like, yeah, he's got some nice buffs to increase defense or attack with increased accuracy. That's useful. He's got the strip. He punishes reviving a little bit. No, he's cool. I think he's decent, but he's not amazing. Got the block buff, single target A1. Yeah, I think Ugir is, again, it fits into this B tier, which is where you sort of expect most of the fusions to be. We'll see when we come to Blizaar. But yeah, Ugir, I think he's B tier, right? He's got some nice defensive buffs. He's got some decent utility. Nothing too special. He might be very helpful for you. He might not really see much play. I think he's pretty B tier. And then finally, we've got Blizaar the Howler. This one is so difficult to rank. I'm going to put him in A tier. This one's really difficult. As a sort of standalone champion, he didn't really impress me at all. However, I think I was wrong about some of it for sure. So one thing, which I think is fair not realizing, because obviously they give us these champions on the test server. They don't have any awakenings, right? But if you get him 5-star awakened, which turned out that was something you could get somewhat, you know, reliably. At least I got him 4-star from the Hero's Path. And that wasn't too bad, actually. And then I can get him 5-star, just save up the essence and buy it in the shop eventually. Or you could have got the 5-star in the Hero's Path if you had a ton of resources or lots of credit cards. And yeah, Blizaar with 5-star awakening, he can solo Sand Devil 25 in like 3 minutes with food champions. That's really useful. Like, that's genuinely super useful for an account. Really, really good. I think he's also very likely to be very strong for a lot of Cursed City bosses, right? Any of the Fire Knight hard stages. I'm especially looking at higher difficulties. I think he's going to be great there. On top of bringing like AoE freeze and a lot of defensive buffs for your team, I think he's going to be a great champ for the Cursed City, especially. So for me, he goes into A tier for that, but especially the Sand Devil. That's what pushes him into the A tier for sure. The fact that he is insanely good for Sand Devil. Again, you can have like an insane team for farming Sand Devil. You can farm it very quickly with like, I don't know, like Sifi and Kaimar and a few Gnuts or something. Like, you can do it, I think, really fast. And yeah, you can do it real fast, but if you don't have that perfect team, soloing it with Blizaar is probably the best way to do it if you were able to get that awakening from the Hero's Path. If you didn't, and this is where it's awkward, if you didn't get that awakening, it becomes much more difficult to get that value out of him. He's not good for Sand Devil. In that case, he probably is maybe more of a B. We'll see. He's the newest one, so it's a bit hard to judge. I think he can be decent for Fire Knight hard as well. I mean, Gnut really overshadows him there, but he is still decent. He's a solid option. Could help with the waves. Like, I could see the two potentially even running together. You never know, right? So, one to watch. Anyway, there you go. Am I happy with this? Looking at it overall, what do we think? I think it looks fairly solid, honestly. Yeah, like I think people could be a bit more divided on these. I think the top 4, at least, I think everyone is going to agree that they are the top 4: Gnut, Pythion, Razelvarg, and Emic. I think that's going to be pretty undisputed. And I think that Oella is probably well enough regarded by most people as well to get a fairly high ranking. The Blizaar, I think, is controversial. And I think all of these ones here are potentially controversial. Depends how optimistic or pessimistic you are. I could see a lot of people put them all in the D tier and be like, they all suck. I think this looks fairly all right. I think this looks good. Will I move anyone around within the tiers? No, I think Oella has more standalone value than Blizaar. Blizaar's a bit reliant on the Ascension. I think Emic, yes. Gnut, Python, Razelvarg. I think that's fair. I mean, you could arguably swap these. I'll leave it like that, though. It looks fine. Again, over here, I think this looks fairly fine as well, actually. Maybe Supreme Elhain should be top of B, but no, I think this looks pretty good. There we go. We got somebody in every tier. This looks solid. I think it's good. Let me know what you think. Let me know all the ways that I am wrong. But yeah, I mean, there's a good few, right? If you think about it, hey, 6 out of the 12 fusions were absolutely well worth doing. And then, you know, the other ones were like, hey, maybe you might need them. There was only a couple that were like, yeah, you could probably skip. They're not very useful. But yeah, 6 of them at least are pretty darn solid. So there you go. That's where the expectation for 2024, isn't it? 50% chance every fusion is going to be actually really worthwhile. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.